Hello, I'm Sensei Alex Kakio. Thanks for joining me this evening for Dharma Sunday, where we take canonical Buddhist teachings and tie them with everyday life. The title of today's talk is, Does Free Will Exist? Before we get into that, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. That way you'll be notified when I post talks in the future. If you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, that'd be great too. So when I was in college studying philosophy, one of the questions that we always asked and were never able to find an answer to was, does free will exist? Are we making choices for ourselves, or are we automatons controlled by some outside entity or simply slaves to our biology? And this is a question that has puzzled philosophers for centuries, going all the way back to the time of the Buddha. And based on an article I found earlier this week, it looks like it's still puzzling people. So I'll read a bit from the article first, and then I'll give you the Buddhist perspective on free will and whether or not it exists. Okay, so the article comes from theguardian.com. Title is The Clockwork Universe: Is Free Will an Illusion? And it was written by Oliver Burkeman. And it looks like there's a little aside here. A growing chorus of scientists and philosophers argue that free will does not exist. Could they be right? So let's get into it. Towards the end of a conversation dwelling on some of the deepest metaphysical puzzles regarding the nature of human existence, the philosopher Galen Strawson paused, then asked me, "Have you spoken to anyone else yet who's received weird email?" He navigated to a file on his computer and began reading from the alarming messages he and several other scholars had received over the past few years. Some were plaintive, others abusive, but all were fiercely accusatory. "Last year, you all played a part in destroying my life," one person wrote. "I lost everything because of you. My son, my partner, my job, my home, my mental health. All because of you. You told me I had no control. How I was not responsible for anything I do. How my beautiful 6-year-old son was not responsible for what he did. Goodbye, and good luck with the rest of your cancerous, evil, pathetic existence. Rot in your own expletive, Galen," read another note sent in early 2015. "Your wife, your kids, your friends, you have smeared all their achievements, you utter expletive," wrote the same person, who subsequently warned, "I'm going to F you up." And then days later, under the subject line, "Hello, I'm coming for you." This was one where we had to involve the police, Strawson said. Thereafter, the violent threats ceased. It isn't unheard of for philosophers to receive death threats. The Australian ethicist Peter Singer, for example, has received many in response to his argument that in highly exceptional circumstances, it might be morally justifiable to kill newborn babies with severe disabilities. But Strawson, like others on the receiving end of this particular wave of abuse, had merely expressed a long-standing position in an ancient debate that strikes many as the ultimate in armchair philosophy. Wholly detached from the emotive entanglements of real life, they all deny that human beings possess free will. They argue that our choices are determined by forces beyond our ultimate control, perhaps even predetermined, all the way back to the Big Bang, and that therefore nobody is ever wholly responsible for their actions. Reading back over the email, Strawson, who gives the impression of someone far more forgiving of other people's flaws than of his own, found himself empathizing with his harasser's distress. "I think for these people it's just an existential catastrophe," he said, "and I think I can see why." The difficulty in explaining the enigma of free will to those unfamiliar with the subject isn't that it's complex or obscure, it's that the experience of possessing free will, the feeling that we are the authors of our choices, is so utterly basic to everyone's existence that it can be hard to get enough mental distance to see what's going on. Suppose you find yourself feeling moderately hungry one afternoon. So you walk to the fruit bowl in your kitchen where you see one apple and one banana. As it happens, you choose the banana. But it seems absolutely obvious that you were free to choose the apple, or neither, or both instead. That's free will. Were you to rewind the tape of world history to the instant just before you made your decision, with everything in the universe exactly the same, you'd have been able to make a different choice. Nothing could be more self-evident. And yet, according to a growing chorus of philosophers and scientists who have a variety of different reasons for their view, it also can't possibly be the case. This sort of free will is ruled out simply and decisively by the laws of physics. This is one of the most strident of the free will skeptics, the evolutionary biologist Jerry Coyne. Leading psychologists such as Steven Pinker and Paul Bloom agree, as apparently did the late Stephen Hawking, along with numerous prominent neuroscientists, including V.S. Ramachandran, who called free will an inherently flawed and incoherent concept. In his endorsement of Sam Harris's best-selling 2012 book, Free Will, which also makes that argument, according to the public intellectual Yuval Noah Harari, free will is an anachronistic myth, useful in the past, perhaps, as a way of motivating people to fight against tyrants or oppressive ideologies, but rendered obsolete by the power of modern data science to know us better than we know ourselves, and thus to predict and manipulate our choices. So I'll stop there. In the interest of time, I think you get where the article is going, but again, that's The Clockwork Universe, Is Free Will an Illusion? And you can read the entire article at theguardian.com, where it was written by Oliver Burkeman. So, does free will exist? They seem to think no. But what did the Buddha think? And what did the patriarchs and matriarchs that came after him have to say? To answer this question, we first have to understand how Buddhists see the universe. How do we make sense of this thing happening around us? How do we make sense of ourselves? We have to understand the nature of a thing before we can decide if that thing, us, has a will of its own. So what is reality? Well, according to Vasubandhu, he and his brother Asanga were the founders of Yogacara Buddhism. Our reality, that is the universe, it has three natures. There is the storehouse consciousness, the dependently originated nature, and finally, the imaginary nature. So to put that into perspective, we have the storehouse consciousness, also called the Dharmakaya, or the wisdom body of Buddha, which is that which is beyond name and form, kind of the foundation of everything. Karmic seeds are planted into the storehouse consciousness, and when time is right, those seeds ripen to become the dependently originated nature, which we talked about earlier. So when you hear dependently originated nature, simply think karma. Karma, of course, is simply cause and effect. And that karma all intersects together, my karma, your karma, the houseplant's karma, the sun, the moon, the stars. Everything in the universe is affected by karma and generating karma simultaneously. And as that karma comes together, it creates what's known as the imaginary nature, which is the world as we see it around us. Now, it's important to note that when we say imaginary, we don't mean not real. Okay, so usually when we tell a child, you just imagine that, we're saying that it didn't happen, it doesn't exist, it's not real. That's nihilism, and that's not what Buddhism teaches. When we say that something is imaginary, we simply mean that it does not have a separate, permanently abiding self. It does not exist outside of that interdependent nature of the universe. So I am imaginary. Not because I'm not talking to you right now, I am, and you're listening. I'm imaginary because if you chop me up into a billion pieces, there's no thing inside of me that is Alex. I am the aggregate of an infinite number of things, an infinite number of streams of karma coming together at once. Thus, the Buddhist philosopher Zhao said that emptiness, which is what we're actually discussing here, the teaching of emptiness, also known as shunyata, is the description of reality. It's not the destruction of it. Now, the thing we have to know about karmic seeds is, as I said earlier, they only ripen when the time is right. And we can think of the storehouse consciousness and the karmic seeds as a garden. So the storehouse consciousness is the soil in our garden. We plant seeds, let's say tomato seeds, in that garden. And if the conditions are right, they'll ripen. If the conditions are wrong, they won't ripen. Or maybe they'll ripen many years from now. So if I plant those seeds in my garden right now, in the middle of winter, nothing's going to happen. If I wait till, say, June, let's say, of next year and plant them, they'll grow up in a couple of weeks. So we never know when karmic seeds are going to ripen. We just know that they will eventually. You'll see why that's important a little later. So what does all of this have to do with free will? Well, if we understand karma and the laws of cause and effect, it does appear like we don't have free will. Because like I said, everything is a result of karmic seeds that are growing out of the storehouse consciousness. So what this suggests, what the article is suggesting, is everything we're doing is just the result of karma that came before us. So I'm not making choices to talk to you right now. Rather, that's my karma making me talk to you. And I don't know exactly what seeds were planted. It doesn't really matter. The point is, I'm just doing this because my karma says I have to. Now, if we have that viewpoint, then the article is correct. None of us are in control of our actions. None of us can be held guilty or responsible because of what we do, because again, it's all just karma. However, we have to remember that there are various types of karma. Two, to be specific. There is indifferent karma, and there's efficacious karma. Indifferent karma is karma that, for the sake of conversation, has nothing to do with us, right? The sun rises in the east and sets in the west. A lightning storm forms in the county over from us. That's indifferent karma. We're affected by it, sure, but it's not the result of our personal actions. Efficacious karma, on the other hand, is karma that we're creating. Okay? So we can think of it like this. Indifferent karma comes from seeds planted by other people. Efficacious karma comes from seeds planted by us. Now, why is that important? Well, karma comes into play when we think about the 5 universal mental factors, which are the mental factors which make up our thinking and our mind, and by extension, make up our choices. The 5 universal mental factors are contact, attention, perception, sensation, volition. Okay? And those things happen in a cycle every second of every day in our mind. Contact, I see a shirt on the floor. Attention, I pay attention to it. Perception, maybe I'm a little irritated. Clothes don't belong on the floor. Sensation, I remember, oh yeah, I took that off this morning after my workout. I forgot to put it away. Volition, I make a choice. I pick it up. I put it in the dirty clothes. Every one of our actions, including the one made in the article of choosing the apple versus the banana, comes from karma, and by extension, comes from the 5 universal mental factors. Now, it's important to note that when we talk about karma, and the 5 universal mental factors, some of that is indifferent karma coming together, some of it is efficacious karma, meaning some of it is out of our control, and some of it is very much within our control. Now, as a general rule, we can't control our thoughts. If I tell you don't think about pink elephants, you immediately think about pink elephants. It can't be helped. However, we can control the number of thoughts that come into our heads, and we can choose if we decide to act on those thoughts. So if you look at monastics and how they often live, they have very strict rules. They don't listen to music, they don't watch TV, they don't eat very rich foods, or even rules, if you read the Vinaya, of not sleeping in high fancy beds. Not because those things are bad per se, but because they stir up the mind. They plant lots of seeds that ripen, and then it's hard to have a calm, contented mind as a result. Now, when we talk about the 5 universal mental factors, some of them are in our control, some of them are not. Contact is indifferent. It's completely out of our control. Yes, I guess technically, as I'm looking around the room, I could close my eyes, right? But if my eyes are open, I'm going to see what I see, right? I can't control. Whatever's in the room is going to come in through the sense organ of my eyes. That's indifferent karma. Attention, however, is efficacious karma. I make the choice about what I want to pay attention to. If I see the shirt on the floor, I can look at it or I can look away. Perceptions are out of my control. Whether something is good, bad, neutral, that's indifferent. That's just coming out from things that have happened in the past. Again, not my choice. Sensations, thoughts, emotions coming into my head, again, indifferent, not within my control. Something makes me angry, if it makes me happy. I don't know if you've ever had someone tell you calm down, but it's irritating, right? You can't just make yourself calm down. It's out of your control. But volition, what I do in the world is within my control. That's where I make a choice. So of the 5 universal mental factors, there are 2 points where we have control, where we make the choice. That's attention and that's volition. Keep those in mind. Because this is why Buddhist practice is so important. Because the 5 universal mental factors, again, are happening constantly, whether we think about them or not. We only have control over 2 of those factors, attention and volition. So we can choose to take control at those points, or we can choose to just let them go on their own. So, do people have free will? Most people don't, because most people are on autopilot. The 5 universal mental factors are going in their head. They don't pay them any attention. They just act on whatever they feel. I have the sensation of anger come into my head, so I lash out at a coworker. I have the sensation of fear come into my head, so I don't send in that email to my boss asking for the promotion. I have the sensation of pleasure come into my head, so I keep drinking, even though I know I need to drive later that night. Volitional acts are where we have the option to take control, but if we don't, we act on autopilot. We act on karma that's come previously. Attention, like I said, is the other aspect of the 5 universal mental factors where we have control. Most people, however, don't pay attention to what they pay attention to, right? So they just go through the world and they focus in on things with no idea, no thought of, well, is this healthy? Is this useful? Is this life affirming? Is this how I want to be spending my time here on earth? The media says I should watch this movie. No thought about what this movie will do to my mind. I'm just going to watch it because it's popular. The media says that I should buy these clothes or this expensive jewelry. No thought about whether I have the money to afford these clothes or this jewelry, or whether this will make me happy, or if there's another way I should be spending my money. No, the media says this is what I should do, so I'm going to do it. We give up our free will to the outside world, and then we wonder why our lives are a mess. This is why Buddhist ritual is so important, because it helps us calm our minds for a little bit. Again, we can't control our thoughts, but we can control the number of thoughts in our mind, right? So if we sit in meditation and we stop all of the information coming in through our sense organs, right? We sit in front of our altars, or if we're Soto Zen practitioners, we stare at the wall. So now we're not seeing much of anything. It's a quiet meditation hall, so we're not hearing much of anything. We're not moving from our cushions, so we're not feeling much of anything. So very few karmic seeds are being generated. Very few karmic seeds are coming up as thoughts in our mind. And now we can think clearly. Now we can see what's happening, and we can make better decisions. This moves us from an outside locus of control to an inside locus of control. It's not our family, it's not our friends, it's not the media, it's not the government telling us what to do. We're making decisions. And how do we make decisions in Buddhism? Well, we do things that are wholesome and that are life affirming. More specifically, things that end suffering for ourselves and other people. In order to exercise that, again, we focus on what we want to pay attention to, because we know that what we pay attention to generates thoughts and feelings in our mind. And we make decisions on whether or not we want to act on those feelings, those sensations in our mind. So again, we might feel anger, which is perfectly normal. Everyone gets angry, including the Buddha after he realized enlightenment. But instead of lashing out at the coworker, we exercise free will. We think about what we're feeling, we're thinking about how we want to respond, and maybe we take a few deep breaths. We count to 10. Now we're in control. Now we have free will. We still say what we need to say to the coworker, but now we're calm and respectful. Now, understanding free will and the differences between indifferent karma versus efficacious karma, one way to think about this is we can't control what karmic seeds are in our environment. We can't choose our parents. We can't choose what country we're born in. We can't choose what language we were taught when we were kids. We can't control the seeds around us, but we can choose which seeds we want to pick up. More than that, we can choose which seeds we want to plant and help grow. This is the practice of Buddhism. This is the study of the Dharma. Vasubandhu, very famously in his 30 verses, broke the Dharma up, broke karma. Dharmas are aspects of reality formed by karma, and he broke those dharmas up into wholesome and unwholesome dharmas. Dharmas that create happiness and joy for ourselves and others, dharmas which create suffering for ourselves and others. Why? So that we could choose, so that we could exercise free will through volitional action and through attention. Now, how does this work in daily life? Well, primarily it works through morality. We generally don't think of moral discipline as being a revolutionary act, but we have to remember samsara, that is the world we live in, this cycle of suffering, is born of greed, anger, and ignorance. So if we simply act on what the world tells us to act on, we behave like animals. We don't act in a way that's in accordance with the Dharma. We don't act in a way that's beneficial for ourselves and for our neighbors. Instead, we chase after sense pleasures. We hoard money instead of being generous with our neighbors. We lash out at people who are harmful towards us instead of treating them in a calm, respectful manner. We do damage to ourselves and our own body because we don't care about the long-term problems. We only care about our short-term pleasure. Morality, on the other hand, is born not of greed, anger, and ignorance. Rather, it's born of wisdom, compassion, and mercy. Instead of behaving like animals, we behave like Buddhas. And as we behave like Buddhas, we plant karmic seeds in the world which allow others to do the same. The best example of free will we can find is in the Buddha. He was born into a world that said that if you were a king and he was the son of a king, you didn't have to care about other people. Quite literally, there was a caste system in India at the time that said other people were less than human, that they were not our concern. Buddha exercised his free will and broke out of that cycle of suffering, saying that all beings are Buddha. And he invited all people, men, women, high caste, low caste, to join his Buddhist community. He acted morally, and we can do the same. Oftentimes, when people think of free will, they think about just doing whatever we want. But we don't think about, why do we want to do this? Where does this want come from? Is it coming from me? Is it in my best interest, or is it just because this is what Instagram is telling me to do? This is what Facebook is telling me to do. This is what Netflix is telling me to do. This is what the government wants me to do. Are you making the choice, or is the world making the choice for you? Do you have free will, or are you a slave? A slave to sense pleasures, a slave to desire, a slave to greed, anger, and ignorance. This is the choice that each of us has to make every day. Now, how do we make this choice? Very simply, we practice mindfulness. Primarily, mindfulness of perceptions. So remember, we have the 5 universal mental factors: contact, attention, perception, sensation, volition. Perception is right there in the middle, and perception is a tone. It's good, it's bad, it's neutral, and it's useful perception because this is how we can train ourselves to pay attention to our minds to ensure that we are exercising our free will. And it's very simple. We simply check in with ourselves and ask ourselves, how do I feel right now? Am I pleasant? Am I unpleasant? Am I neutral? That's it. That's all we ask. That's all we label our mind: pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And as we get in the habit of doing that, we start investigating, well, why am I pleasant? Why am I unpleasant? Why am I neutral? Am I feeling unpleasant right now because I'm in an environment that's unhealthy? And maybe I just shouldn't come here anymore? Am I feeling pleasant because I'm sitting down with someone and having a conversation who is being calm and loving, and thus maybe this is a person I want to spend more time with? Am I neutral because I'm just enjoying my time in the park and, hey, this is a good way to spend a Saturday? By asking ourselves that question, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, that leads to other questions, and we begin that investigation of our mental factors, which again leads to the exercise of our free will. So I think I'll end very simply. Originally, I asked the question, does free will exist? And the answer is maybe. What we need to ask ourselves is, do we want free will to exist? Do we want to make choices? Or do we want to let the world make choices for us? Amitabha. So that's the talk for today. I hope it was helpful. I'll just end with a few announcements. So this was Dharma Sunday. It happens every Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, broadcast from this channel. If you enjoyed this talk, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Hit the like button. That'd be a huge help both to me and the channel. And on Wednesdays, we do something a little bit more involved. We do meditation and sutra study, which consists of a 15-minute guided meditation, a reading from a Buddhist scripture, followed by a Dharma talk. So I hope to see you then. Until next time, Amitabha.